The establishing of this records dates from the search of my first job. Review and evaluation of the listing of vacancies on a nearby net website online can be a tedious task. But when you stay in a metropolis with people, it complicates your search even numerous times, forcing them to decrease your minimal necessities for the job. Every day I went to college and got here lower back home, so I absolutely wanted the money. Once, making ready to depart, I came about to word on the advert that I was once very impressed. It was once a job at the morgue. The thought that I have to work around useless bodies simply depressed me.
Nevertheless, I persisted to study the job description and determined that the work does not suggest interacts with any of the cell phone took location right here and my actual horrifying story from the morgue.
I have no different options, I notioned to myself.
The subsequent day I known as and spoke with anyone who, in my opinion, used to be the main.
He insisted that I the subsequent day got here and just got acquainted with this place. The subsequent day I was once geared up to work and go to a small school. Mark, the important in the morgue, greeted me at the door with a smile and a company handshake. You stated your title was once Michael?
He requested me kindly.
Yes, all right, I instructed him. He held me throughout, and then added me to a massive lawn, which, as he explained, I have to mow each week. I do no longer idea this. He in the end completed the tour and we entered the building. He pointed to a dimly lit room in the corner. I'm positive you can bet what this room, he said. I suppose that even with my eyes closed I may want to decide what room is that, due to the fact of the unique smell of decaying flesh. The premise from the establishing has induced me disagreeable feelings. If I knew what horrible records contains the morgue this room I'd no longer stepped foot in here. Then he got here to any other small room and took the keys from his hip. Opening the door, he commenced to provide an explanation for that it used to be his office.
Looked internal, I noticed a table, a giant chair, the scattered papers and a mini fridge, however, nothing unusual.
Soon he closed the door and locked it. Then he started out to exhibit the room in which we were, as soon as entered the building. Dirty and cracked tiles of the ground have been speaking about age and prenebrezhenie mindset to work. You'll have each night time to easy up in here, nothing special, it is a exceptionally small territory, he explained, banging his chin with the fingers, wondering about different tasks. To throw away garbage, convey some items, when they will come to us in the morgue, for example, a small field with formaldehyde or a new scalpels.
I assume that any small random jobs that would possibly appear must now not have to be difficult.
He completed to explain.
All clear?
Any questions? Nothing I ought to suppose of, so simply affirmatively shook his head and assumed that he will proceed the tour. Well, he said. See you right here the following day about 5 p.m, you'll work till night time or so, okay? Well, I told him. Following a few nights of work were quite simple. I come, eliminate any disturbances that happened during the day, mow the lawn, and then just kill the remaining time.
I simply sit down on my telephone or observing TV, which stands in the frequent vicinity of the building.
He appeared to in no way mind, due to the fact most of the time he simply did now not come out of his office. He comes when you get hold of a new physique in the morgue. I be mindful the first time I noticed a clean corpse, which used to be delivered to us. Mark got here out and commenced to discuss to the police. They wrapped the physique and made some notes. Next, Mark transported it in a dimly lit room, was once positioned in a telephone in the wall, and Zasenal morgue disappeared. Most of the time the subsequent day held a expert autopsy, which has produced Mark. I labored in the morgue for quite a few weeks, and Mark, it seemed, was once very friendly. He usually sold me lunch from the neighborhood BBQ save on the road.
One day he used to be discussing his frustration he had due to the truth that all the previous that used to be in the front of me, the personnel, are gone.
I ought to inform that he appeared a lonely man, as if he used to be nobody. I constantly shared with him this afternoon, and I definitely felt that we obtained a little connected to one another.
He used to be about 45 years old, however he already had a little gray hair.
His eyes truly had sorrow, although his voice informed a specific story. Mark generally cleaned my workplace and the room, the place our bodies had been stored, round 8 p.m. Room the morgue used to be small. It had about 10 racks, the place you can put lifeless and then cover in the wall. He mopped up the floor, which generally have been no longer very dirty. Once in a while it is particularly windows, and once in a while he wiped down the steel door. However, in 90% of instances, all instances achieved in 5 minutes. At 9 or 10 o'clock he normally went about his business, possibly 15 minutes. I suppose he had a ingesting problem, due to the fact he got here lower back smelling of whiskey and cigarettes. Like clockwork, at 11 o'clock in the night time he went to the shop and sold some snacks. Usually he lower back with 4 yogurts, 4 small applications of potato chips, 4 orange and 4 bottles of water. Sometimes the merchandise ought to change. He offers me simply one and then went into his workplace and put the relaxation in a mini fridge. Mark constantly stayed later than me, so I assume he sold them for myself for later. One night time about 9 o'clock Mark got here out of the room, the place you save physique, with a atypical feeling of anger. The door to the room he slammed so challenging that she barely parted. At this time I used to be in the procedure of cleansing the ground in the frequent room, so he regarded into the room. The ground there was very soiled because, I think, Mark simply dropped a bottle of formaldehyde. Glass was once scattered all over the flooring and spilled brown liquid.
I realized that Mark was once certainly pissed, so I left.
Thinking that if I smooth the room I'll provoke my boss. I walked in and right now started out to wipe. I picked up the portions of glass and threw it away. I'm nearly completed when I heard a sound in the building. I raised my eyes, waiting for that in a room any person comes in, however no one used to be there. I genuinely simply heard a noise, so I stood my head raised, looking ahead to hear something else. I heard a knock at the door once more and jumped up like a scared cat. The noise got here from the wall in the back of me. At least I idea so. I used to be standing in the room for the subsequent 5 minutes, however nothing extra used to be heard. Room the morgue used to be nonetheless maintaining me in suspense. I walked out of the room, satisfied that I simply stimulated myself sounds, as it used to be the first time I stepped foot into this abnormal place. I was once looking at TV in a small room, when I got here, returned Mark. The scent of liquor was once right away interior my nose. He seemed at me after he appeared into the room with the bodies. You removed, he said. Yes, I replied. He stated nothing, however regarded at me with his glittering, bloodshot eyes. Well, he said, going into his office. The subsequent day I supplied to wash the constructing from the backyard with a hose, what I did not prefer to do. He from time to time got here to me to test how I'm doing my job. It drove me crazy. The day used to be very hot.
"You like a little fireman," he stated to me with a creepy smile.
What? I notioned to myself. It used to be the most weird issue he has ever stated to me. Mark informed me that the closing man who had the job earlier than me determined that it would be first rate to dig a ditch here, due to the fact the rain had washed all the flowers.
I referred to as a miner, he stated with a laugh.
The subsequent night, when I completed operatica, he made me go to the store. I hated to go to the keep late in the evening. It used to be simply weird. I rapidly went again to the morgue and observed the constructing does no longer light, even avenue lights on the facet of the street close to the morgue went out. I stared at the ominous constructing and slowly walked over to the front door. "Mark," I called. There used to be no answer. I gulped and stopped in fear. Some unknown pressure threw me back, however I nonetheless crossed the threshold and noticed that no one used to be inside. The door to the room, the place he stored the useless physique, used to be vast open. I slowly walked in and appeared round the room. I observed something strange, which had now not observed before. The two most far away stands had been padlocks, if any person used to be concerned that the corpse did no longer go anywhere. Cold sweat ran down my back. The front door of the morgue flew open, and Mark noticed me standing there, amazed and a little nervous. He swiftly entered the room, the place I used to be, and closed the door. I used to be simply pressured viaduct the mess of documents, so I went for a walk, he explained. I seemed at him skeptically. He rapidly modified the issue and defined that he wished to center of attention on something in his office. He left me in the frequent room alone. I seemed into the room, the place our bodies have been saved again. In one nook I noticed a small surveillance digital camera that used to be aimed at these two excessive compartments. Strange, I thought. Mark abruptly got here out of the workplace and requested me what I used to be doing. I became round and said nothing. There used to be an awkward second of silence. Mark was once sharp and indignant glance. Why is the digital camera searching so weird? I requested a trembling voice.
He lightened his tone and defined that the preceding worker stated it was once the pleasant location for the camera, due to the fact she can see the total room.
Mark laughed at home. He backed to his office, closing the door in the back of him. I have not viewed him all night. I knocked on his door at midnight, however there was once no answer, so I simply stated goodbye to him.
I walked out of the morgue, the place there was once this ordinary story, and headed to my automobile in the parking lot.
Through the very dim mould of the window Mark, I should see his darkish and horrifying silhouette. It began to end up extraordinarily paranoid. I left the parking lot and went home, understanding that due to the fact of my exhilaration I forgot to take my pockets and smartphone out of my locker for employees. I used to be so angry. She slammed her palms on the guidance wheel. I do not choose to go back. After about 15 minutes I used to be about the gloomy morgue. I stopped in the front of the morgue and seemed at the black windows. Deep chills shot into my body. I could not even force myself to get out of the car. I'll get my stuff tomorrow, I idea to myself. The subsequent day at 5 p.m. I used to be already at the workplace. I did not see Mark in the subsequent hour. I assumed he is in his office. The grass used to be mowed, the flooring was once washed, rubbish thrown out, and the windows had been clean. I determined to kill some time washing the soiled lawnmower. It took me half of an hour. In a few minutes got here out of nowhere. Mark. There is my fire. Excitedly he exclaimed. I am now not pleased. I peered at him, too well known his presence. Yes, I said, now not paying interest to the conversation. A few moments later I regarded up again, however he disappeared like a ghost. I have not considered him in over the subsequent few hours. I did all the work. I even wiped all the chairs in the dwelling room. After that I have quite a few instances knocked on the door, Mark, awaiting him to answer. There was once a silence. I sat down determined that I would continue to be on all night. After a few moments, Mark broke through the front door. He used to be truly drunk, his phrases have been slurred. He should barely stroll in a straight line. He fumbled with his keys in the door of his workplace, and in the end opening them, he shortly pulled them out and slammed the door at the back of him. The keys slipped from his palms and fell to the floor, however he did not notice. I sat a little scared and overwhelmed from what simply seen. I seemed at the keys on the ground, and my ideas started out to lead me forward. I waited about 10 minutes and went to the door. Mark. I have a number of instances very without problems knocked, however acquired no answer. 3 instances I knocked on the door. Nothing. I bent down and slowly lifted the keys up.
My curiosity was once very high.
I went to the room with the corpses and opened the door. Chills enveloped my physique when I entered the room. I approached to installed rack the place hung the locks and began strumming the keys. I inserted the key and the lock opened. I recoiled in concern when I heard a determined sound and a muffled scream. I used to be constant on his feet, respiratory hard. I seemed in the frequent room, nothing has changed, Mark. The door nonetheless closed. I plucked up the braveness and slowly rolled the body. My coronary heart skipped a beat when I noticed a man in years, perhaps 18, dressed in soiled overalls with black boots. His mouth was once plugged with a fabric and securely tied round his face. His complete physique was once tightly certain by means of ropes that worsened his capacity to move.
His eyes spoke of worry and terror, however additionally desperately referred to us for help.
I stumbled, no longer understanding what to do. I had to open every other rack. He rapidly slid in and pulled out a padlock. Stand shortly swung open and I was once more struck by the overwhelming experience of concern and danger. There used to be some 23-year historic guy, carrying for sure pretend police uniform. Beside him used to be scattered with used condoms.
He regarded at me desperately and backed away. His eyes shared the identical opinion as the preceding guy.
I realized that there is any other locked desk, which I had no longer observed before. I hurriedly opened it, watching for the equal result. When I started out to pull out the rack, I did not see something inside, however I persevered to pull her through. At the cease of the bar used to be taken my photograph when I was once standing with the hose backyard the building. In addition, there used to be a fireplace fighter helmet. I stepped again and became pale. I ran out of the constructing and locked in his car. I have not even had time to name the police. I simply sat in a stupor and notion about a maniac at work. Here's a frightening story about the morgue passed off to me.